3, 2, 1. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Steve Beverly's TV Classics. We're just 1 week away from Labor Day weekend, and that means our 11th annual Labor Day TV Classics Marathon. We're going to have not one, not two, but three new editions of TV Classics during the marathon. So we're going to spread that out, that in prime time, we're going to be bringing you something brand new every single night. We'll start at 6 o'clock Central Time, and I think you're going to just have a great time, as we always do on all of our holiday marathons. So the big thing to remember is just drop in and drop out as you can, but enjoy some of the great all-time classics of television as we come your way from 6 on Saturday night all the way through 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, the day after Labor Day. It's going to be great, great fun. Well, tonight we've got a mixture of things for you. We've got a couple of musical shows to start out with, and then we go to drama, and then we're going to wind up with some more fun and games. We'll have another comedy that'll come your way in the third hour, as well as one of your favorite all-time game shows. But tonight we open up with a bit of a bittersweet note. Many of you who are music fans, and particularly from the era of the 50s and the early 60s, remember the Everly Brothers and what they brought to the rock and roll scene. Phil and Don were, there's no question, they were among the idols of so many teenagers, appeared many times on American Bandstand. And we lost this past week Don Everly, the other of the two Everly brothers, and it was really something that, particularly on social media, brought back a lot of memories of people who lived through their era. And they tried to see if they could evolve with the times into the late 1960s, but their careers, other than just continuing to do nostalgia concerts, never did really take back off again. But one of the shows they did that has been preserved is one of the last of the Tennessee Ernie Ford shows that were done in color back in 1961. And Phil and Don joined Old Ern for a little bit of comedy, but much more music. And I think you're going to enjoy this half hour once again as we celebrate a musical team that meant a lot to young people who grew up during the 50s and 60s. So here we go, the Everly Brothers, the guest stars on the Tennessee Ernie Ford Show. It looked like the possibility of a comeback for the Everly Brothers in 1970. Johnny Cash was doing what it looked like in the first season was going to be a long-running, successful variety hour. And so, as was the deal with so many of the people who hosted variety shows in the 60s and 70s, they got first crack at producing a summer replacement show. They didn't really do a lot of reruns of the variety hours, maybe 2 or 3 that were toward the tail end of the spring, but then they tried to get something fresh, and maybe in the hope with the networks that somebody would strike gold and get big ratings. Glenn Campbell certainly did that in 1969 when he was on what we call the Summer Brothers Smothers show at that time. But what really happened in the case of the Everly Brothers is that in attempting to forge somewhat of a hybrid between the music of the 50s and this, suddenly as you get into 1970, they tried to do their own summer variety show, and it was called Johnny Cash Presents the Everly Brothers Show, and it was on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock all throughout the country. It was a well-produced show, although all the summer shows that were done were on a much lower budget than the regular season shows. And they tried to bring on newer and younger performers as their guest stars, but it just didn't quite have the magic that Johnny did, at least in his first season. Of course, as we've told you many times, there was a lot of network interference in the show, and Johnny was canceled after his second year on ABC. But the Everly Brothers gave it a good shot. They had 9 weeks, and as I said, they brought in many of the younger performers, some of the newer ones that were hitting the pop charts. it just didn't strike gold, and so that was their last big opportunity at headlining a variety show. But I hope you enjoyed that get-together with Tennessee Ernie Ford and the Everly Brothers, because that was really beginning to be at the peak of their popularity when they were having so many hit songs. Well, now we're going to show you a half-hour variety show that we never have before because we just found it. Back in the late 1950s, Betty White did a comedy that we've shown you before here on TV Classics called Date with the Angels. And it was probably hamstrung because it was on ABC that had so many fewer affiliates than the other networks. But what happened in this case is that when Date with the Angels was canceled, they allowed Betty to do her own replacement show on that in the spring of 1958. And so the Betty White Show, she had done a daytime show called the Betty White Show, but this was her opportunity at a primetime half hour. Comedy sketches, but you see Betty sing in this one. And it was really not a bad show whatsoever. But I'll tell you after you see it why it didn't click. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take you back with this one 63 years, where Betty White was just a young girl of 36 at this point. And here we go. We're going to send you back to ABC, and you'd see she's got a wonderful cast of regulars on here. It's the Betty White Show. As I told you, Betty had done a reasonably successful daytime show for NBC, but she just could not click in prime time. She did a situation comedy that was really more a series of 3 sketches every week called Life with Elizabeth. That was her first big crack. She had done it on local television in Los Angeles, and then they decided to go national in syndication. And the shows were funny and the scripts were well written, but syndication was a hard thing to crack for situation comedy. There were a lot of failures, unlike the action-adventure shows like Highway Patrol or Sea Hunt. Situation comedy, just if you didn't have the big network budget, it was hard to crack. So she came back with ABC in the late 1950s and gave a crack at a primetime situation comedy that many people thought had everything of success written all over it. It was called Date with the Angels, and we've shown you several episodes of that. It was scheduled, though, originally on Friday nights at 9:30, and it didn't have a good lead-in, and it was somewhat mired in the fact that ABC had so many fewer affiliated stations at that point in time. So, Date with the Angels, they tried moving the time slot, but where did they put it? They put it on Wednesday nights at 9:30 against I've Got a Secret, which was television's #1 panel game show, and it was slaughtered in the ratings. So that was the time slot when they allowed her to replace the show and tried the Betty White Show, which was done live. It was a live variety show for a half hour every week, more comedy than music. But again, you're going against that tough competition. And Betty told me in an interview back in 2003, she said, I couldn't get arrested to do a primetime network show of my own for ages after I'd had 3 failures. And so that's why she became such a prolific game show player, because she was great at doing it, and they loved having her, because if you had Betty White on, particularly in the opening weeks of a game show, you had a much better chance of success. But unfortunately, Betty could not crack prime time successfully again until she got that rich role in the early 70s on the Mary Tyler Moore Show of Sue Ann Nivens. And then all of a sudden people realized that Betty could act as well as play games and host the Rose Parade on NBC, which she did for many, many years. But I hope you enjoyed that look back at how Betty had a crack at primetime network television back in 1958. Now we go to an hour of drama. And one of your favorites, I know because you tell me this on a regular basis, is The Millionaire. And tonight, John Beresford Tipton with his emissary, Michael Anthony, will be visiting a couple, and it is going to be somebody who, the male portion of this, is going to be somebody who was one of your sitcom favorites for 8 years. And also he played the very, very intense attorney Judd for the defense. I'm talking about Carl Betts, who was the husband on TV of Donna Reed on the Donna Reed Show. But before that series, he was doing a number of dramatic roles, particularly on television's anthology shows. So tonight we're going to show you how fine an actor he was in a dramatic role, as we send you back to this episode from 1956 of The Millionaire. We were so accustomed to seeing Carl Betts play Donna Reed's husband, of which he did a very, very good job of. He was not just merely window dressing. He had some powerful episodes, and he played comedy quite well. But we never really knew how strong of a dramatic actor he was until a couple of years after Donna Reed went off the air, and he landed what was really a plum role in a Friday night dramatic courtroom series called Judd for the Defense. And Clinton Judd, the character that he played, was a high-priced Texas attorney, and he would show up in his cowboy hat and his boots, but he was a powerful attorney in the courtroom. Yet on Judd for the Defense, he lost some cases from time to time. It wasn't a Perry Mason where he was undefeated. He lost some cases, and it was really what I thought was one of the best written shows and tailored to his talents. So much so that in the second season, Carl Betts won the Emmy as the outstanding actor in a dramatic series. And it was such a, if you will, a bittersweet moment, because Clinton Judd was canceled. And the ratings were not that disastrous, but it was a very expensive show to produce, and ABC just would not stay with it for a third season. But we'll show you a Judd for the Defense episode in the near future again, so that you'll get an even greater feel of what Carl Betts' acting talents were like, and they were many. Now we go to an anthology that we've never shown you before, and this is one that was on Monday nights on NBC, and it featured a rotating series of 4 stars, and frankly, one of them would go on to become a major, major film star, and that is Jack Lemmon. The show was called Goodyear Theater. Goodyear put a lot of its money into live drama. The show that we showed you last week, Marty, on Goodyear Playhouse on NBC, and throughout the 1950s. That was a very, very popular show on Sunday evenings. But when we got to the late 50s and early 60s, the live dramatic shows were beginning to go by the boards, and so television's remaining anthology shows were on film, and many of them were a half hour. And tonight, you're going to see Jack Lemmon star along with the little sister of Natalie Wood, Lana Wood. And tonight, I think you'll see some sparks between the two of them. But Jack Lemmon was the actor who really carried Goodyear Theater. So tonight, I hope you'll sit back and enjoy one of filmdom's greatest stars, but also He was terrific on television. This was probably the only thing that he came close to doing as a weekly series, and he starred in 8 of the 32 editions of Goodyear Theater. So here we go, Jack Lemmon on Goodyear Theater. Now, Jack Lemmon appeared from time to time as a mystery guest on What's My Line. He actually was on the panel of What's My Line a few times. But once he hit gold with that big role that he had with Tony Curtis in Some Like It Hot, his movie career began to push him away from television. He occasionally would do a special from time to time, as well as showing up on What's My Line. But he was just such a marvelous, larger-than-life talent on film, and he could do both comedy and drama, that there just wasn't going to be time or the money to keep him in television. But I hope you got a sense of his talents doing the half-hour format as opposed to, say, an hour-and-a-half movie. And he really was the one. You could look at that particular episode, and some of the scripts on these filmed anthology shows were not the greatest in the world, but he had an ability to rise above the script. So I hope you enjoy Jack Lemmon on Goodyear Theater. Well, we move forward now into a little more fun. And one of our favorites that we have from time to time is The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. 132 episodes out of the 428 that were done are now in public domain. This is one of them, and this is one that came from the final 2 seasons of the show, in which they were done in color. This is not colorized. This is legitimate color. The episode is called A Rose a Day, and this is one of those where Ozzie just seems to be completely ill at ease with what's going on in his surroundings. And you find some very, very interesting comedy in this one. This is at a point in time when Rick and Dave had, they were in their, well, let me think about this. You go back, and Rick was probably about 25 and David was about 29. So they had reached a stage where their careers, as far as the regular series was concerned, it had pretty much peaked. Now, Rick would show up and sing a song from time to time, and they'd do maybe about a third to a half the show surrounding him and David. But in this particular episode, David directed it, and he was trying to move himself more into abilities to direct as well as to act. He had been doing some films as well as Rick. So tonight we go to 1965 in this episode of The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet in color. Ozzie and Harriet had some of the best known and best liked character actors in regular roles. Of course, you go back to their next door neighbor for the first 5 years of the show, Don DeFore, who went on to a great success when he starred in Hazel as George Baxter. But then you had others, such as Parley Bear, who was the irritating Mayor Stoner in Mayberry, but he was a much more lighthearted neighbor on Ozzie and Harriet. Frank Cady, who went on to become Sam Drucker on both Petticoat Junction and Green Acres, and he was known as Doc on the show. He was a pharmacist. And so you had him, and then you had people that would show up as replacement next door neighbors, and that was unquestionably Lyle Talbot, who happened to be the father of Stephen Talbot, who played Gilbert on Leave It to Beaver, one of Beaver's friends. And of course, playing his wife was Mary Jane Croft. She had that really annoying high voice, but she, of course, later on became Lucy's friend. After Vivian Vance had left the show, she became Lucy's friend, Mary Jane, on The Lucy Show. And so they really did have some very talented character actors that really supported the Nelsons on the show, and they were just really, I think, some of the glue that made this show the longest-running live-action situation comedy in television history, 14 years, from 1952 to 1966. Okay, so you saw Ozzie and Harriet in their regular show. Now you're going to see them in a different element. Yes, and part of the people who are on the show I'm about to show you, they don't know that Ozzie and Harriet are there. and that's because it's What's My Line. Ozzie and Harriet are going to be the mystery guests on this particular episode, and it is a hoot to watch them as they try to fool the panel together as one answers to one question and then the other one will answer to a succeeding question. So I hope you're going to enjoy this because it is absolutely great fun. The two other games that they play are also entertaining. But here we go. We're going to take you back in this one. This goes from the late 1950s, and it's back to CBS on Sunday nights at 10:30 as Johnny Olson, or whoever the announcer was, would say, "Let's all play What's My Line?" That was great fun with Ozzie and Harriet as the mystery guests. It was always interesting when they would have a couple, or let's just say if it was Robert Young and Jane Wyatt who played husband and wife on TV, and they were mystery guests at one point in time, or Lucy and Desi together, and you would have them trade off answering. And so if they weren't certain that there were two people out there trying to fool them, they eventually began to get it. And it was always fun to see how the various celebrities would try to disguise their voices. Some would be much more successful than others. There's one which the great actor Edward G. Robinson, who of course was the perpetual gangster in movies, but Edward G. Robinson, he did an Italian accent that really fooled the panel until Arlene Francis zeroed in on his laugh because she had appeared on stage with Edward G. Robinson on Broadway. But having Ozzie and Harriet doing this, we had an hour of them, and I hope it was entertaining for all of you tonight. Now, let me bring you back up to date one more time like I did at the beginning of the show. Starting next weekend, we'll be on an hour earlier at 6 o'clock Central Time right here on E Plus TV 6. For those of you who will be watching on Roku, don't pay any attention to times I mentioned here, but it's going to be our 11th annual Labor Day Marathon of TV Classics. So we'll have a brand new show at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, 6 o'clock Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Monday night. And then the rest of them are going to be some of the best of the TV classics that we have had within the last 5 years. And I think you're going to see some very, very fond memories. And I hope you just spend a lot of time when you aren't doing things with your family. And if you just decide to hang around Jackson, then join us for that. Drop in and drop out whenever you want to. The only interruption we will have is, as we always do here in Jackson, is between 7 a.m. and noon on Sunday, when we will be bringing you our church services that we have that is so vital to our spiritual life in our community. But then we'll pick it right back up at 12 noon with more TV classics. So that's going to do it for this week. I hope you all have a fabulous week leading up to Labor Day and enjoy being with your friends, your family, and I hope work isn't too hard. So until we're with you again next Saturday night. Oh, remember, tomorrow night, Best of TV Classics right here on E Plus TV 6. Until then, Steve Beverly saying, remember to keep watching the classics because that was when television was fun. Let me see what happens here.